Paddy Power, sponsors of the Road to Cheltenham.
Hi everyone, welcome to Road to Cheltenham. I'm really looking forward to this edition's show, not least because Ruby Walsh is back in the studio. And Ruby, we've got lots to talk about. After that second freeze, there was major action over the weekend.
Oh, last weekend in Cheltenham was magic, wasn't it? And there was some great racing in Ireland and up at Doncaster as well. So yeah, it was really good stuff, and some more magic racing this weekend.
Well, it's exactly that, isn't it? We've got the Dublin Racing Festival to look forward to this weekend. We've also got some significant races in Britain as well, such as the Silly Eyes, the Towton. We'll be talking about those races during the course of the show. But first of all, we're going to start by looking back. And the first thing we're going to start with, Ruby, is analyse this. We asked our viewers what they would like you to analyse. Sean Bowen winning the cross-country on Back on the Lash, Harry Cobden winning the Timeform Novices Handicap Chase on Stage Star, Paul Townend winning the Thyestes on Carefully Selected, or Niall Houlihan winning the rescheduled Clarence House on Editeur Du Gite. And it is C, Niall Houlihan, that they lighted upon.
What surprised you in that vote?
What surprised me in that vote? That Harry Cobden was as close to Niall Houlihan as he was?
Yeah, it surprised me too. I thought Stage Star bombed in. Look, I'm a massive Harry Cobden fan, but not sure Stage Star took as much riding as maybe some of our viewers did.
I suppose Harry has stressed after Cheltenham and also after Newbury that this horse is more difficult to ride than it might seem because he tends to lug to the left. I could see that at Newbury. I couldn't see it so much at Cheltenham.
No, anyway, look, doctors differ, patients die, but I think the right ride has come out on top anyway.
I love that phrase of yours. Right, OK. So, analyse this coming up next.
Yeah, so Niall Houlihan aboard Editeur Du Gite won the vote for analyse this anyway, but it's a front runner ride. Very important when you're making the run that you go fast enough to keep everybody happy behind you. Bottom left of your screen, he was doing 32 miles an hour to the first, 33 miles an hour to the second, but then he starts to slow it down as he gets onto the main race course here at the last fence first time round. He's back down to 30 miles an hour and he keeps decreasing up the hill. That's what you should do. Back down to 28 miles an hour as he climbs away from the stands. He's slowing down to conserve energy. Now when he turns the next bend, obviously as with the undulation of the track, momentum is going to make him go faster to the first fence down the back, up to 32 miles an hour, but straight away Niall is slowing it down. By the 8th fence he has it back down to 30 fence, and as he starts to climb then to the fence at the top of the hill, 28. Back down it comes again, 25 miles an hour when he gets on top of the hill. That's riding the undulations at Cheltenham, and then he starts to let him roll. Round the bend he's starting to increase to 4 out. By the third last he's up to 37 miles an hour, but what he does at the back of this fence is what wins it. He starts to go again and quicken, but he's quickening now to the bend and gets up to 37 miles an hour in the incline, but he's making Energumene and Edwardstone chase him as he's quickening. That's what tires them out. So when Edwardstone gets to him, by the time they get to the last fence, Editeur Du Gite is starting to slow, but because he's made Edwardstone chase him in the hottest part of the race, Edwardstone doesn't have enough to sustain it to the line, and Niall Houlihan gets back in front and Editeur Du Gite. It's a really, really good front running ride. He rode the undulations of the track and he committed when he had to. Look, I'm delighted for them. I was delighted for the Moors. It was great to see Josh Moore there as well, and I think that was a win that everyone was delighted to see.
Very much so. I thought it was an exquisite ride from Niall Houlihan, his first Grade 1 success. I think it's only his 59th of his career. I mean, it's incredible, and he'll have a bigger, tougher assignment, obviously, in the Queen Mother Champion Chase, but that was superb.
The hardest part about winning Grade 1s, Lydia, is getting on
the right horse.
And I know better than anyone.
And it's interesting that that's forced a change of plan with Editeur Du Gite as well. They were thinking, let's go low, let's go Game Spirit next, and then go to the Celebration Chase at the end of the season. But now they've got to go big and try and win the race that they won with Cider Grugy.
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
You buy the dream is alive. Why wouldn't you?
Okay, they have absolutely earned it. In a moment, we will have a look at the Clarence House Chase in the round from the perspective of all participants. So let's do exactly that now. Ruby, if you take us through the race from start to finish, you've always set up how the race was run via the prism of Editeur Du Gite. What did that mean for each of the individual runners?
Yeah, and then we look at the two that we were all looking at, no point in line before the race started. Energumene in the middle of the shot in the blue colours, he gets very high at the first. Willie Mullins blamed the white takeoff boards, perhaps that was it. But if you're Tom Cannon, Lydia, what were you going to do? You were going to follow Paul Townend. That's what you had to do. That's what I would have done, so I don't think Tom Cannon's in the wrong place at all. But what happens to him is Energumene starts to run a bit keen down the hill here and goes right with Paul Townend. And as Paul takes back to try and settle Energumene, that drags Edwardstone back out of the race. Now Energumene did show a tendency to go to his right, got it close to a couple of fences, but as they begin to descend and Niall Houlihan starts to quicken, Paul has only gotten Energumene to settle. Editeur Du Gite goes off the back of the third last, and now he has the two lads chasing him. Edwardstone is just too far back. He's riding to beat Energumene, but unfortunately for him, Niall Houlihan has kept enough on Editeur Du Gite in front. Second last fence, they were okay. Edwardstone arrives then close down the outside of Energumene to the last. Edwardstone does, and Energumene can't go to his right here. And to me, that's why he might have missed. Some people say he didn't have the energy to make the jump. I think the fact that Edwardstone was bang beside him, he couldn't go right, he didn't get off the ground. Edwardstone gets to the front, Editeur Du Gite even battles back, and the result is in the Moors' favour.
Okay, so let's do it in reverse order. Beautiful ride on Editeur Du Gite, and it shows that he can be ridden differently. I know the big two are watching each other, but also they might have assumed that Editeur Du Gite was going to set the kind of pace that he did at Kempton, where he just went hard until he couldn't go hard anymore and burnt everything off.
But the lads were riding in the race, so they will have known by the time they were climbing the stands, past the stands, that they were slowing down. But I think Paul probably over-racing and Energumene is going back to try and settle him, and Tom Cannon has set out to ride the race to beat Paul Townend. He gets dragged back behind Paul Townend. That's all that happens. It happened to me in the Champion Hurdle and Hurricane Fly. AP got behind me in binocular. I never got to rock on Ruby. AP didn't get to me. It happens, and that's only one example. It'll happen loads of times, but I don't think you can be critical of Tom Cannon. I think you make a decision going out as to how you should ride a race, and to me, he went out to ride the right race. Hindsight's a great thing. It didn't turn out, but his plan was right, and I think you shouldn't knock someone that went out with the right plan.
There was also the element of Edwardstone over racing, I think, as well. Afterwards, Alan King was talking about how fresh he was, and this is a horse, he said, all the way along, benefits from racing regularly. So the kind of season he's had has not been completely ideal. He needed a run. Yeah,
and Paul felt the same about Energumene, that he was overly fresh as well. Now, maybe they were, and that'll be music to most people's ears who thinks horses they all should run more often. But both thought they were a bit fresh, and they should both be spot on for Punchestown. Now, ultimately then, you might get Editeur Du Gite and Edwardstone at Sandown. Energumene will go back to Punchestown. It would be great if they met again at Cheltenham and met again at the end of the year. You know, that'd be the ideal scenario, but look, it is what it is.
On Edwardstone, I was really impressed by the potency that he had to be able to, being in what turned out to be a disadvantageous place, to make up that ground, to head Editeur Du Gite. I thought that was very impressive. It
was an incredible bit of running, to run down those 6-7 lengths, and he had to start running him down when Editeur Du Gite was still quickening. So that makes it even harder. You're burning twice the energy. If you're chasing a horse down who's tiring, it's much easier to catch up with him. But if you have to start your run as he's still quickening, you're burning a lot of energy too.
Totally agree, and it's understandable why Alan King was so pleased with Edwardstone.
You have to be, yeah.
Yeah, really satisfied by it. Clearly, Editeur Du Gite has a player's claim in the Queen Mother Champion Chase. And how about Energumene? I mean, I've bored you for 2 seasons. Is it 2 seasons? It is 2 seasons now.
Longer,
with
it.
Adjusting rights.
About Energumene, only the last 2 years.
Well, that and other things. I mean, take your pick. But this time I'm specifically talking about Energumene. The adjusting right. I agree with you. The fact that he couldn't adjust right when he needed probably long as well, didn't he, at the last, that is what forced the error.
I think it is. Now, you could argue that it's because he's getting tired. I think it's because Edwardstone gets right beside him and he goes to take off, he can't, puts in a half a stride and does extremely well to stay standing. What you would love about him as a chaser, though, or a 2-mile chaser, is how low on that shot he kept his hind end. He's very unlikely to ever go over. He keeps his back end right down. So he's good at that. He gets himself out of it, but he did need to go right and he hadn't got the room.
That is a point we've talked about as well, actually, through the 2 seasons that he's been racing. Although he does have this flaw, foible, whatever, of going to his right, he never looks like falling. No. And it's just a mistake, and how big that mistake might be. Has that exposed a conspicuous chink in Energumene's armour?
I think that's the beauty of horse racing. You can argue it has, and then you could argue that he's beaten Funambou Savola a long way further than he beat him in the Champion Chase. He was too keen. You could argue he wasn't close enough. I think the beauty of that Clarence House was we didn't get any answers. All we got was an anticipation of what might happen again the next time, and I think that's great.
It was absolutely a superb race. Now, we have questions from our viewers. We'll start with Dan Kelly. He wants to know whether you think that Paul Townend will revert to letting Energumene make all or lead in the Champion Chase. He seems to be best in front with a relentless gallop rather than possessing a lightning turn of foot. And are you still confident he can win in March? And thank you very much, Dan, for saying you love the show. Road to Cheltenham regulars as well, Giants Causeway and Phil Richards have been having a discussion, and they're coming from a singular angle, but they're also wondering whether Energumene jumps better in front.
I didn't think he jumped poorly in last year's Champion Chase, which is probably the highlight of his career. When he dropped in last, he absolutely routed Shaq and Bourgeois punches down when he got a lead. I think, look, and I'm a big believer in this, people get hung up on position. I'm a much bigger believer in pace and where you are at the pace you're going, whether that be in front, behind, even last. Racing is to do with pace and has very little to do with position, especially, and maybe on the dirt it does when you get in front of kickback, but on turf it's the speed you're going, not the position you're in. So you can book out to make the run in the Champion Chase, but if you and Editeur Du Gite go too fast, you're in the wrong place because your pace is wrong. So I don't believe in this has to make the running. I would have got it as instructions from owners at times and maybe even trainers. This has to make the running. No, it doesn't. It just has to go a strong gallop. There's a big difference.
I suppose Dan was talking about the difference between having pace, as you say, and a turn of foot.
He needs pace. So what you would try and counteract that is if Paul Townend rode him the next day and got to Editeur Du Gite's tail early in the race to keep Niall Houlihan going a bit faster, keep Editeur Du Gite maybe a bit more on the steel. That's how you might alter it. But I don't think you just go to the start and think, I have to make the run.
Not if you've got any sense. Do you think he'll still win, retain his title?
I don't know. I think the Clarence House race more, I don't know, I think it'd be a great race the next day.
I agree.
So in what Blue Lord does this weekend as well, like I think, from a race, this Cheltenham Festival, it's going to be so exciting.
It really is going to be excellent. I've much stronger on Edwardstone having seen the Clarence House, but I do think it's going to be a terribly exciting race. Ruby's mentioned Blue Lord. Let's have a look at the Dublin Chase. It looks one-sided on paper, doesn't it?
Very much so, but like to think you have 4 horses, and look, Gentleman to Me did win an entry last year. So Royal is a great old warrior. Dunvegan ran well in a handicap the last start, and Fast or Slow is the wide outsider, but you're never going to have more than 3, maybe 4 at the top in the Champion Chase division, and we saw 3 of them last Saturday, so there was always going to be a weak race then.
That's true, and we could have then 4. I mean, it's very appealing. Yeah. As you say, with the Clarence House raising so many questions.
Yeah, but the whole thing's gone so uncompetitive, Lydia.
Well, fingers crossed they all turn up, and look forward to the Dublin Chase. Right, we're going to switch distance now. We're going to go up in trip for the Cotswold Chase. How did you see this? It was won by Ahoy, Senor. Aye, aye.
Look, how did we see it? As we thought it might, you'd throw it on Ahoy, Senor, bang in there. They both ducked out good and handy. Noble Yeats sat up behind them to the first fence. Ahoy, Senor rocked on down, jumped the first reasonably well for him. Round the bend, Noble Yeats has dropped to last by the time they get to the second fence. And Protectorate, if you keep an eye on him going to the third, you can see how keen he is with Harry Skelton going to the water. The fourth fence was the first resemblance of a mistake from Ahoy, Senor. He puts down and jams on, and that allows Frodon to take over. Bryony booted him through going to the fifth. Now again at the eighth fence, Ahoy, Senor is awkward again. So twice in the first 8 fences he hasn't been great, but that's just him, isn't it? 10th fence, you can still see Protectorate in behind him. He's still really keen for Harry Skelton, and up past the stands then the 5 of them are quite close together. Now Sounds Russian starts to make his move down the back into the race under Sean Quinlan and gets beside Frodon after they jump the ditch after the water jump. He's right in contention now. He's obviously keen to keep the pace on in this race, and he takes over going to the 15th, which was quite a distance from home. There was a big change in tactics with him, and they were very forceful on him. Noble Yeats and Ahoy, Senor both missed this ditch, one down the end and one at the back. Neither are great. Noble Yeats into the back of Ahoy, Senor, and he's off the bridle going to the 4th last, where Sounds Russian makes a howler of a mistake and does well to stand up, and then it turns into a slog. They had up the ante way out. Protectorate starts to fade. Noble Yeats are starting to run on. Sounds Russian is still in front, but it really has played into Ahoy Senor's hands, and he comes back really tough. 3 1/4 in the Gold Cup is really going to suit him. Sean Bowen, he just kept pushing and shoving on Noble Yeats. He gives him one backhander after the last, but that was it. That was the only time he lifted his hands off the reins on him. No cheek pieces either. And Protectorate, who got tired, didn't finish as far back as I thought he was going to.
John Quinlan.
I kept saying Bowen, did I?
Only heard the latest one.
He's riding Noble Yeats though, isn't he?
Oh, sorry, were you talking about Noble Yeats? Oh, apologies. I thought you were talking about sounds Russian in that sentence. Apologies, sorry.
Oh, you're right. Well, I will get mixed up now.
No, that was
the
me
tall
getting
one and the short one. No, Sean Bowen only lifted his hand once on Noble Yeats.
I see, sorry.
And Sean Quinlan looked like he was writing instructions to me.
Well, he was. Ruth Jefferson said afterwards that she wanted him to be handy, and she did wonder whether that meant that he didn't have much left for the hill. It was a muggling pace, wasn't it? Although Sounds Russian made it a slog eventually by going on so far out. Early on, it was stop, start.
It was a little bit, yeah. But I'd say in testing ground, they're probably going fast enough, for my money anyway, for the ground, the trip. And I think then when you go only okay early, or what I would consider fast enough if I was riding, which would only be okay, if you do inject speed a long way out, it does make it very stamina race. I thought the ground was more like good to soft. I thought it was a lot less on times than testing than the official going was saying. Yeah, but frost, dead, no life, no kickback.
All the jockeys were saying it was dead. That's definitely true.
That's what you get from frost.
OK, let's hear from our viewers first of all, and we'll go through the main players from that race individually. We'll start with thoughts on Ahoy Senor. Gary McDaniel, who's a regular, has the impression that he may be a Grand National winner in the future. Oh, no. I think he may find one or two too good for him in the Gold Cup. I've backed him for the Gold Cup anti-post since December 2021.
Some canal turn in Ahoy Senor, wouldn't it? It's a good job there's nobody out there anymore in the stand.
Oh, God. No, Gary, just no. I mean, the canal turn, yeah, as you say, and he's just going to be such a klutz.
Hope Derek Fox can swim.
Tam's got something to say about this as well. Why has there been no headgear applied to try and get him to concentrate more? Well, that'll help him tank even more.
That's catch-22, and he is by Dylan Thomas, so he is slightly highly strung, so I could see your argument to make him concentrate at the jumps, but I think it would make him go even faster, and I'm not sure that speed is his thing. Do his brain and his feet coordinate when he's in top gear?
Not really. But new course at Cheltenham, like that was, extra furlong, that's ideal for him. There's not many tracks or races for his ability in the country where things actually coalesce to suit him, and that was one of them, and the Gold Cup will be another.
Yeah, it will, yeah. But I also think the extra furlong will suit Noble Yeats as well.
I think that's true as well. And on that note, we have a viewer's question. Take it away, Helen Sheridan.
How will Noble Yeats fare in the Gold Cup? Is he a boat, too slow and so far out the back that he'll never get into it, or will the stronger gallop suit him and he'll thrive? Is there a consensus at Road to Cheltenham?
That's really good, wasn't it?
I hope he doesn't go down like the Titanic. Was that the Titanic? It looked like it anyway.
It did.
Look, you could say he'd be too far out the back. Look, I think he's the kind of horse that will be coming in a Gold Cup. Do I think he'll be able to come fast enough maybe to get himself in front? I'm not so sure, but I do think he will come from off the pace and run a massive race.
Surely they're going to reapply the headgear. Emmett Mullins, his trainer, put on first-time cheek pieces for the Grand National to try and make sure he didn't get too far behind. They're surely going to do the same for the Gold Cup, aren't they?
Yeah, they will. They didn't necessarily work for the right reason at entry, but I think that was more to do with the false start and his second time round, and he was last crossing the Melling Road and last when he got to the first fence. But look, you could see Sean Bowen pushing and driving on him, whereas Sam Whaley-Coleman, he rode him a completely different style of rider. Sam rode long and deep, so you'll see him here at the back of Beechers when Sam changes his hands. You can also see him squeezing in with his legs and tapping him into the rib cage to get him back on the bridle. He doesn't have to ride with his body as much as Sean Bowen does, but by the time he got up by the winning post, head out in the second circuit, Noble Yeats had got himself into an ideal position, 6th, 7th down the inside. So look, I think he might get outpaced early in the Gold Cup, but I think the further the races go, the more he will be coming into it.
You've put him up at 66 to 1. I've put up Ahoy Senor at 25 to 1. I think
I'm not swapping tickets.
No, I don't. If I was in your position, I wouldn't either. I think they've both got place claims. I'm not sure either of them are quite good enough to win.
Probably not, but I don't mind having a place claim with a 66 shot.
No, why would you? Sounds Russian earned his place in the race?
Definitely, and he did. You just wonder the way he maybe didn't quite get home. Would back to Liverpool in the spring suit him better?
He's an improved. I really like him. He's a consistent.
He's going the right way, but I think he should run in the Gold Cup. I just probably would ride him a little bit more conservatively.
Yeah.
Or allow Sean Quinlan to ride him a bit more conservatively.
Yeah. I mean, Ruth said so immediately after the race. Then there's Protectorat. And Dan Skelton was thinking he was going into the race to win and thinking he could probably win with a horse not at 100% Gold Cup percent. And he said since that he thinks he undercooked him and that the horse blew up and took a blow at the wrong moment and then stayed on again late. What's your take on Protectorat?
Dan was living in his ditch sheet days when Caudo Star and Denman could turn up at this time of the year and win 3/4 cooks, but they were Caudo Star and Denman. Protectorat's not Caudo Star or Denman.
Did you see enough in that? I mean, he'd have finished a closer up third in last year's Gold Cup, but for the mistake at the last.
Yeah, I actually thought at going to the second last he was going to be beaten a lot further than he was. So yeah, it does make sense what Dan says. He will improve a lot, but he has to.
I suppose you could also argue they might be cheap lengths as well, given the pace was so muddling in the early part of the race.
Possibly.
And does he need deep ground?
Don't know that.
No? Okay. And my last question before we move on to the Irish Gold Cup is A Plutar, who we haven't seen since he blew out in the Betfair Chase. He's a title holder, absolutely brilliant. Banged a joint the morning of the Savills, goes straight to Cheltenham. We can have a look at the betting now. And he is essentially 8-1. And in some books, he's second favourite by dint of not showing up.
Yeah, and then look, by this time next week, Lydia, who knows what price he could be. He could be shorter again, but look, you've Statler and the Gallop and the Champ are going to run at the weekend. A Plutar, look, the Plutar that won last year's Gold Cup is a hell of a good racehorse. Manila Indo beat Statler at Tremor. Who's to say he's not coming back to the horse that won the Gold Cup? So, yeah, there's probably value about some of those horses in the Gold Cup. 8-1 a Plutar. Someone told you leaving Cheltenham last year you'd get that next February. You probably would have taken it.
Form's a bit dusty now, though, isn't it? I know it was the Gold Cup and it was brilliant.
Yeah, but he won 15 lengths or something.
In a relatively steadily run Gold Cup that played to
what
speed.
makes it in this year's Gold Cup?
You preempt my question.
I always do. I don't know. Ahoy, Senor.
Well, if you preempted my question, how could you not know?
That's why I was asking.
Okay.
Ahoy, Senor.
Okay.
I don't think that there's a massive amount more pace in this year's Gold Cup than there was in last year's. Unfortunately, I don't think we'll have Lampressa.
No, it doesn't seem like it.
No,
sadly.
And he was going to be the one that was going to force Ahoy, Senor, so that is a big difference on the Gold Cup.
Okay. Irish Gold Cup. I'll let you imagine how you think it is going to pan out.
Kenboy buck out, won't he? As normal, I'd imagine Paul will take a lead and Gallop in the Champ. Statler won't be too far away. Neither will Fury Road. And he's second now. Yeah, there's Kenboy, Fury Road, handy down his inside. Franco de Port dropped in. You can see those three horses doing pretty much the same thing again on Saturday afternoon as they did here at Christmas. Here is Statler at Tremor. He got a lead. He probably will get a lead again on Saturday. You'd imagine maybe he could go a little closer to the pace. He is a strong stayer. He's a National Hunt Chase winner. Gallop in the Champ was really relaxed and settled in the John Durkin at Punchestown and the rearranged John Durkin. He'll get a lead first time over fence at this trip. Yeah, Paul is definitely going to ride him behind the pace. Not to say he's going to drop him in or anything, but I'd be shocked if he makes the running. He'd only go make the running if he jumps his way to the front,
yes.
Which he could well do, but he was much more reserved at Punchestown. And then he's second now, placed a couple of Grand Nationals, but he does take a lead, so I can imagine him dropping in. And I know there's only 7 runners, but I wouldn't be surprised if he ran into the money.
Yes, en route to Aintree again, presumably.
Yeah, he's probably missed the boat to win a Grand National, and he's second now. He's been placed in 2 and snuck up the handicap, but he's been great around there twice.
So in Gold Cup terms, eyes on Galopin des Champs, eyes also on Statler.
Yes, definitely.
And what would... Galopin des Champs got to prove himself in open company over 3 miles and prove that he seems to be the more focused, less exuberant... Mature, better word. Yeah,
and hopefully he will, and you're still not going to know tomorrow afternoon whether he'll get 3 1/4 in the Gold Cup or not.
True that. And Statler, what would he have to do?
He at least has to be closing down on Galopin des Champs, I would have thought.
Do you feel he is of that quality? He's quite high in the betting, isn't he, for what he's achieved net?
Yeah, it's probably high in the betting because of what other horses have done rather than what he has actually achieved himself.
So over to Statler this weekend. Right, just before we finish this section, I want to look back on last week's social media poll because it was a great bid on our part. Which of those 3 horses is most vulnerable? We offered bit D, they all win. We didn't offer E, and Twitter won't let you. None of them.
Do you not have Elon Musk's number now?
He stopped taking my calls, Ruby.
All right.
You should always learn from your mistakes, shouldn't you? So here's this week's social poll. There's no E again.
I'll tell you what there is. If they all get beaten, I'm definitely not going to Willie Mullins on Tuesday morning.
Well, let's hope it's D that wins. Let's see what the public think. You're safe. Tuesday's fine. It'll be a breeze.
Yeah, did you see how right that poll was last week?
I did. Right. We've got some questions about this. Howard Crace, first off. He's talking about, and I love this word, Howard, I am going to steal it from you, the Mullinisation of racing continues apace. We shrug our shoulders, mumble it's not great, but the situation only intensifies. He has 33 of 66 entered in Grades 1s at the Dublin Racing Festival. Maybe build a stand at Cleeve and we can watch the races there to save the travel costs. Now, David Weir makes an important counterpoint, and I think this encapsulates the argument. Without his 33, what would races look like? Now, my little fact checker.
They're both wrong. Because 33 becomes 31 because Il Fabiolo was doubly entered, and 66 becomes 64 because of him and American Mike, who was doubly entered. So it's 32 of 64, gents. Get your facts right when you're going to make very important statements. And I agree with the second man. What if Willie didn't turn up? Supposing even Saturday, supposing Willie just decided appreciated doing him in the Arkle, and you didn't have Dysart, Dynamo, Il Fabiolo, San Roy and Flame Bearer. What kind of a race do you have then? I think the bigger question is, where are the rest of the horses? All the Willie Munns are there. Where's everyone else's?
And where, I mean, we touched on this before.
We don't have the answer. I think that's the bigger question, though. Willie, you know where Willie Mullins is going to go. Christmas onwards, his horses appear. He's taking them all on, or most of his on. What don't you have? Blood Destiny is not running against Lossiemouth. He only ran a couple of weeks ago. Energumene was in Cheltenham last weekend. The Mayor's Novices ran last week at Fairyhouse. What do you call the mare that goes left or right, whichever direction she goes left? Brandy Love will probably go to the Cleeve Hurdle. Not really a race for her there. Maybe the Champion Hurdle if you were being cold-hearted about it, but she hasn't proved she should be in it. And what else is Willie missing? Shack and Poursois ran the Kinloch Bray along with Houghton Callure. Can't just be on Willie Mullins to keep turning up. All of his are there. Where are the rest of the horses? Well,
and the point there is, at least he's got different owners of these horses, and he's prepared to let them clash pre-Cheltenham. You know, that means that you are actually. I mean, I suppose the Dublin Racing Festival is sorting before Cheltenham, but you know, these horses should be meeting at different points of the season, not just at one festival. Yeah, look,
I suppose sorting could be the word, but there'll still be fresh horses for them to take on at Cheltenham in March, you would imagine.
And so your point would be it's down to where the other horses are from the other trainers in Ireland and also from Britain. Only 3 raiders over for the meeting.
It's an away game, and other than the Irish Gold Cup and maybe the Irish Champion Hurdle, especially when it was brought in first. Persian Moor won the first one because there was no conditions hurdles in England. English horses did target it then until about the late 80s. The Irish Gold Cup has had more UK-based winners than the Irish Champion Hurdle, but the novice races have never been well supported in their old guise when they were 3 separate meetings, or since it's become the Dublin Racing Festival. So there's nothing new there. That's not a new thread that there's no UK runners in those races.
And you wouldn't be in favour of any restraints like maximum number of runners per trainer or per owner?
I think that'd be a great idea this weekend. You'd have take your choice which 2 Willies you'd want, and that makes the races way weaker. I just looking at the horse population, I think there's something bigger going on because how many foals have been born? Where are they all gone? Where are they?
Well, it's something we're keeping looking at. I suppose it's like the Aidan O'Brien flat problem as well with the Irish Derby. This question often comes up. Now, did you mention Persian War for your dad?
No, why?
Oh, just because he mentioned
I was going to say I have a tweet here from your dad about Persian War. I was thinking you have, yeah.
I'd love to be able to do that, but no, it's only because when we didn't mention Persian War earlier in the season, he was saying, "Have neither of you ever heard of Persian War?"
He remembers him all right. I do listen to him.
Occasionally. Let's move on to the hurdlers. And we'll start with the Cleeve, I reckon, Ruby. And for the first time this season, Paisley Park was expected to win and pick up his 4th edition of this race.
Yeah, look, it didn't probably go the way Paisley Park likes races to go. Dashel Drasher jumped out in front with Botox Ha, and Rex Dingle rode the race to suit Rex Dingle. By the time we get down to the second last hurdle, he's slowing this race down. Angelina Bello was struggling very early. You see Harry Cobden giving him a slap on the shoulder up by the stands. 7 runners and they're all in a heap. Not traditional for staying hurdle races, but Rex is slowing it down. Molly's Ollie's Wishes gets really keen here with Harry Skelton back down to the first hurdle on the second circuit, but they're in a complete heap. Third last hurdle now, Angelina Bello misses, and you have Golden Tweet slipping through on the inside, but your eye is always drawn to how easily Paisley Park is going. And when he's going easy, it's never a good sign for Paisley Park. He needs to be off it and becoming on horses that are tiring, but this race was the complete opposite. And now Gold Tweet, Johnny Sharon, pings the second last, but I thought this was great to watch from someone who's never ridden at Cheltenham. He tucks back in behind Rex Dingle and lets Rex Dingle lead him off the bend. And as Dashel Drasher starts to quick and even, Johnny's in no rush to go after him. He crosses over the road, Rex is still opening the gap, but Johnny is, no panic, winning post a long way away, and he tucks over to the outside rail before he starts to make his move, slips through on the stand side rail going to the last, which is always a help at Cheltenham. As Dashel Drasher starts to drift off, Rex is sticking his right hand. Johnny gets a great jump even out of Golden Tweet at the last, and this horse scoots away. Good performance from a 6-year-old, but you would, to me, watching Johnny Sharon, you would have thought he'd ridden in Cheltenham hundreds of times.
It's a copybook new course ride, wasn't it? He must have done a lot of preparation and watched a lot of races into that.
It looked that way to me. He definitely had watched a lot. And as you would do or should do when you're going somewhere you've never been before, you have to do your homework, but it did look like he had a lot done.
They decided they're going to supplement for the Stayers Hurdle. Excellent. That it would be absolutely fantastic. We don't have enough, French competitors in our big races anymore.
No,
the way
we
that
don't.
We used to.
And look, 2 6-year-olds now, him and Tihupu, really coming into the fore with a question mark over the reigning champion Flooring Porter.
He's got to prove that Gold Tweet that he likes an end-to-end 3 miles, because he was unproven at Gallop at 3 miles, because he was unproven at that distance going into it.
He was, but you're unlikely, or not unlikely, I don't know what the score is with Flooring Porter, but taking him out of the Stayers Hurdle takes the pace out too.
True. And Paisley Park would want Flooring Porter to be there to get that end-to-end pace.
It does, but unfortunately for Paisley Park, we've watched him in the past, he's not a front runner, so you can't just jump out and go on him either. He needs things to happen for him.
That keys into a question that somebody sent me about Road to Cheltenham about Paisley Park in the last week, and they were saying, well, why doesn't Aidan Coleman do something about a steady pace? Why doesn't he take Paisley Park to the front?
He did in the past, didn't he? It didn't work, did it?
No.
So I think he proved that it doesn't suit.
Yeah, it's just a vulnerability, I suppose, that he has. Right, Chupu ran in the Galmoy last Thursday. This was a very, very good performance.
It was. Probably nothing more than you would expect on paper from a horse who had beaten Classical Dream and Honeysuckle. What were you looking for? Will he stay? But he's a lovely way of racing for a stayer to Hupu. Look, he's low relaxed. Davy Russell's hands down on his neck, the loop and the reins up past the stands. Sunny Hill Boy's getting a big keen. Longhouse Poet is slowing it down in front, JJ Slevin. But Davy Russell never has to lift his hands. To Hupu just goes along there, sound asleep at the back. Now, he's not great at this hurdle here, and for some reason then Davy thinks, I'm going to get involved. I was surprised watching it, how early Davy rode into the gap between Beacon Edge and Longhouse Poet. That's the 4th last hurdle, climbing the hill. He's now in front of the 3rd last. Your question mark was, would he stay or wouldn't he? And by God, did he. Quickens down to the 2nd last away from Sunny Hill Boy, and away he goes. Beacon Edge made the mistake. My Design has run a cracking race to get more black tight, but form-wise, it was nothing more than you expected. But what you did see was, come away from it thinking, he will definitely get 3 miles.
Yes, and it was the authority and the straightforwardness of it. Usually jumping is an asset for him as well. Let's have a look at the betting, shall we, and how that has impacted on it. I think he's got the most solid current form in that lineup.
Yeah, look, that form in the Hatton's Grace is incredible. There's no doubt about that. As it says, Golden Treat has to be supplemented. But I do like Home by the Lee. I think he's been very good this season. And my one concern with Tehupu is last year Connections did say a couple of times he needs soft ground.
They did.
The tone has changed this year, but his form is on soft ground.
That's the inevitable arc, isn't it, of a trainer or an owner with a horse that suddenly has a chance in a big race. He needs this, he needs. Oh, it might not be that important, but it could be. It could have been 2 miles as well, though. There's 2 ways of reading it.
Speed, yeah. And look, time will tell.
How's Classical Dream?
Classical. I saw him on the gallop yesterday morning.
Okay.
He looked fine to me.
Okay, so hopefully he will be turning up and fingers
Not
crossed.
yesterday, Tuesday. Yesterday was Wednesday. Sorry.
Fingers crossed that Flooring Porter does as well. Let's have a look at the Limestone Lad next, shall we?
Yeah, and look, this was Bob Ollinger, Echoes and Rain. Cashback jumped out in front and went a really good gallop. Bob Ollinger back to 2 miles for the first time since his maiden hurdle, sat second, but Echoes and Rain was quite keen. But she was quite keen on the way at the post, and she jumped by Durasso at the second hurdle, and Paul slots in then behind Rachel Blackmore. But you could see Echoes and Rain's jumping to Bob Ollinger's. Echoes and Rain was always jumping closer and by Bob Ollinger, who was coming back to her. Cashback has run a good enough race in front, but from a long way out, you only wanted to be on Echoes and Rain. I thought there, Bob Ollinger was going to drift out the back of the shot and end up beside Durasso or back behind him, but to be fair to him, he doesn't. He keeps going. She pings the last. Now, she's been found out at Grade 1 company, which Willie did say afterwards. Down a grade seems to suit her. Looks like she's going to go up in trip. Cashback has run a really good race. Bob Ollinger, he's not at his old level, but at least he didn't quit there.
He did finish off his race. What would you do with him?
That I don't know, but from looking at it live, thinking, he's gone, to looking at him actually in the last furlong where he was coming forward, I kind of thought something could happen there yet.
Okay, well, I hope it does. Epitome was in action at the weekend at Doncaster on Saturday in the Yorkshire Rose Mares Hurdle, and she dotted up. She did. Asserted her dominance.
And she jumped brilliantly. I thought she was magic, to watch her. I thought she jumped super.
Yeah, she got her mojo back this season in terms of jumping, hasn't she?
I thought she had,
And it's just a reminder of the calibre of mare that Constitution Hill has been kicking out the way.
It is, but the same for Echoes and Rain when you watch her there. Like, she was well back in the Hatton's Grace when she fell. Like, the gulf, it's so hard. Ratings don't do it justice between Grade 1 and Grade 2, and then between Grade 2 and handicaps. The gulfs are so big.
Let's have a look at the betting, the impact on the mare's hurdle first off. Mary's Rock is still the favourite with Paddy Power. Love Envoy is 7-2 along with Brandy Love, who we yet to see this season. All well?
Yeah, saw her yesterday, Tuesday as well.
Everton's in there. She still potentially has the champion hurdle target and she'd need to be supplemented for this race after a clerical error. Echoes in Rain is 6-1. And then we've got the Unibet Champion Hurdle betting, for which Constitution Hill is 1-3. And then 3 horses that will be taking each other on this weekend in the Irish Champion Hurdle, Ruby.
Yeah, they do. And look, you have Kenboy in the Paddy Power Gold Cup on Saturday. What does the Champion Hurdle lack on Sunday? A front runner. She's electric, made it in the Matheson at Christmas. State Man sat second. Vauban, Piper are in behind. We don't have a front runner on Sunday. Stateman has never made it. Vauban is unlikely to make it. Last year, Heaven Help us made the running, and Zanahiyr on the inside in the red cap sat inside Honeysuckle. Now Zanahiyr is in there. Maybe he will. He made a bad mistake at the first last year. But Honeysuckle, the last time she made the running was a novice hurdle in Thurles in 2018. She's the only one that has made the running, really. Zanahiyr has never looked convincing from the front. It'll be interesting. Paul Townend, Rachel Blackmore. Like, you can have your last 5, or Danny Mullins is going to sit behind the 2 of them. Piper and Zanahiyr.
They're not going to help.
They have to. No, they're not going to help, and they probably have to improve what they've achieved in the last runs. So it'll be down to Paul and Rachel playing poker.
If you're Paul, you would do what?
I would do what? It's a long time since a road statement. I don't think he's slow. She definitely stays Honeysuckle, but does she have a real turn of quick? Would she win a sprint? But if it led into a sprint, is Vauban going to come and beat you? So, like, there's so many things you'd have to think about that. And what way does Rachel look at it? She's a strong stayer. Does she want to get into a sprint? Probably not. Ideally, she'd love Paul in front of her, inside her, and she can push Paul then to whatever speed she wants. But ideally, Paul Townend probably wants to be in that position too. So, I think both of them want a gallop, but I'd say both want to be the cat and be forcing the other one.
But isn't Rachel on the dual champion hurdle winner? Shouldn't she say, come and get me if you're good enough?
I probably would. But you asked me what I do in Statement, not what I do in Honeysuckle.
Oh, I was going to ask, but we got round there in the end. There are many ways to get to the answer, and there we are. Right, let's move on to the mares who are chasing next. So Jeremy's Flame came over here, Huntingdon, last Friday, and absolutely torched our best mare, Zambella.
She did. Were you surprised?
No.
But look, it was a strongly run race. Zambella bucked out, but down her outside came Royal Margot and Found On, and they didn't hang around in this contest, and they opened up a good lead early on. It was definitely a strongly run race, which suited Jeremy's Flame, who can be a bit keen, wears a hood. Keith Donoghue dropped her in at the back. When the two in front steadied up, Darrell got upsized them away the fence past the stands and kept the pressure on them on Zambella. I've probably seen Zambella jump better in the past. I thought she was very good at Carlisle. She brushed a couple here, but by the time they got to the second last fence, Jeremy's Flame is running over them. Keith Donoghue riding so well and so confidently, gets beside Darrell Jacob to the last, and away he goes on Jeremy's Flame. I can't imagine he's been in Huntingdon too many times in the past, but I'd say he enjoyed his day there last Friday.
It was his first ride, I think it was, and afterwards Stuart Machin said, "Oh, you've just beaten the best of British, are you heading for the Mrs Paddy Power?" And Keith Donoghue said, "I think you might have to beat a few that are a bit better back in Ireland," with a smile on his face.
Yeah, she is a good mare though.
Very.
Yeah, and Gavin Cromwell's horses are red hot at the moment.
She would have beaten Curse Sublime and Gentleman de Me even if they hadn't have departed in the Poplar Square, wouldn't she?
She could have.
I think she would have.
It's that long ago, I just can't really remember, but she could have.
Let's have a look at the betting and see how things stand here. Now, it's interesting. Impervious is the 13-to-8 favourite, and Ellie May is out at 16-to-1. They're both now owned by JP McManus, and Ellie May, of course, is the title holder. And I was wondering, I suspect many people were wondering after Impervious was bought by JP, whether everything was right with Ellie May, and that was combined with a lack of engagements from her in the middle part of the season. We haven't seen her since, was it Clonmel? I don't think.
Clonmel, yeah.
I was speaking to Frank Berry, the racing manager for JP McManus, and he said that she's had a small setback, but she's back in training. Have you seen her at
I have, and she's hard to miss.
Yes, she is.
She mightn't be that big, but when you're as white as she is, mind you, I probably look right beside her, but she's in good nick.
And it's enough time, the setback, she's back in training.
Yeah, she's in full work, yeah, she's doing plenty.
Okay, that's good news. Right, okay, let's move on to the Novice Chases now. And we start at Doncaster with the Lightning Novices Chase Grade 2, in which Tommy's Oscar, slightly surprising to me in terms of the manner of it, downed Boot Hill.
Yeah, me too. I wasn't sure about him after watching him in Cheltenham early in the year. He'd been beaten in Newcastle in his last start, but it was a good performance from him. Shouldn't have been surprised at the weights, with his rating over hurdles, with his ability. It's come together for him over fences, and I thought he was much slicker at Doncaster than maybe I thought he could be.
Yes, I thought he looked slightly intimidated by the Cheltenham fences when he was beaten by Banbridge. He does adjust right. The Hamiltons, Anne and Ian, aren't going back to Cheltenham. They don't think he likes undulation tracks, so they're thinking about something like Aintree. They also don't want to travel that far with the horse, and I think that's a good plan with him. I
would think so. They went there in November, and yeah, and I suppose that probably, not tarnished, but it definitely affected my view of him. But Doncaster suited him better, and I could see why you would go to Aintree, and I think even Ayr at the end of the year,
yes.
You get 2.5 round there.
Are they? I think Ayr and Aintree might have swapped positions this year because it's a slightly weird year. I don't think you can do both.
They could have, and even like future champions at Ayr, I know it's 2.5, but I think that would suit them either.
Yeah. In terms of Boot Hill, it's a very contrasting ride from Johnny Burke compared to the Wayward Lad, where he held on to him really late against Alkenris.
He told you, sitting here last Thursday, he was going to hold on to it again.
Yes, but he was disputing the lead
Ring
4
him
out.
and ask him what happened.
Johnny, make sure you take my call 1.
Where's the winning post, Johnny?
So do you think he was in front too soon, essentially?
I don't. I didn't. I was working in Cheltenham. I only watched the replay of it. But I just did have a flashback to him telling you, as I was listening last Thursday, that he was going to ride him the same as he did in Kempton.
Answered on a postcard, Johnny. Right, let's talk about Sir Gerhard. First thing, great to see him at Thurles last Thursday. Not so great the jump at the third.
No, definitely not. Largy debut, jumped out in front. Keith Donoghue rocked on down to the first. Thought Sir Gerhard was fine early on, to tell you the truth. A bit to his right at the first, okay at the second, but the third then, he's just, I don't know what he does. Great picture in the Irish field of it, actually, where you can see where his legs are into the middle of the fence. But look, I was working on this, Lydia, and I'm thinking, what's he going to do with the next? And I was delighted to see him. He popped it, but I thought he could go really high and he didn't. Was better at the next stage then. Every fence then got better. Third last, he's coming to beat Largy debut, galloping all over him, pings the third last. He was good at the second last again, pricks his ears, shifted marginally right there, but not dramatically, and he was good at the last. Look, Largy debu's a weak finisher. You'd be hoping that a horse of Sir Gerhard's ability would do that. He made one bad mistake, but it didn't frighten him, and he went on to the next and jumped it. I kind of would be happy enough with that.
Yeah, you're more positive about this than I am,
Yeah,
I think.
To make a mistake like that, the next fence, to me, tells a lot.
That point I take.
Yeah.
At that point I take, and I probably should have given that a little bit more weight when I was thinking about it. But nonetheless, the right adjustments, the fact that Willie Mullins is potentially talking about the Brian advisory rather than the Turners, maybe to give him more time at his fences.
Yeah, but I'd say at the time Willie is standing in the parade ring in Gowran thinking, well, I've 5 in the Arkle next weekend and I've 4 or 5 in the 2.5. What do I have for the 3 mile? So I would wait till at least you've watched the weekend before you make your judgment on that.
Yeah, that's probably going to change things around. But Tony Keenan was making the point on Off the Fence that this horse will go into Cheltenham with only one previous Novice Chase start, and that's the most inexperienced Novice Chaser Willie Mullins will ever have actually run at Cheltenham, and that kind of profile for the Brown Advisory, what did he call it? He called it the Antichrist of the profile for the Brown Advisory, which made me laugh.
Yeah, hadn't thought about that, but look, it's not by design, Lydia. It is what it is, and that's what's going to happen.
Would you be worried about it?
Didn't worry well, Chief. I know he won an Arkle, but
That's an Arkle, though.
he'll be going faster in the Arkle.
It would worry me in the Brown Advisory. I'd be less bothered in the Turners. You need hardened horses generally in the Brown Advisory.
Oh, it's 3 miles and 1. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, will he stay?
Possibly not.
Big keen in last year's Ballymore.
And it's the tighter turning old course. I know the Ballymore was there as well, but he seems to adjust more over fences than he did over hurdles.
I hadn't thought about it, to tell you the truth.
Okay. Timeform Novices Handicap Chase. I know that you've thought about this, and Stage Star. You mentioned it earlier.
Oh yeah, look, and again, big field, competitive race, jumped out Harry Cobden down the inside, Stage Star, pings the first, does let fly once or twice on. Now I thought the horse on his outside, Fire Dancer, was very disappointing. He'd won at Ludlow and he was favoured. There they are, the second last, gets in close, and Harry has to squeeze him on landing just to hold his position, comes out of his hands at the first down the back, but gets there and stumbles on landing, got there well, again at the next fence, again, launches a bit on Harry, he's wanting to attack them and Harry's wanting to pop them, but Alright Gino's right behind him. Unexpected parties at the back down the inside. He's going to slot in behind Alright Gino as they come down the hill to 4 out. They end up finishing first, second and third, but the further they were going, the better this horse was going. Stage Star jumped the third last really well. Panic Attack got badly outpaced in the orange, jumps 2 out well. Harry still hasn't got it from down to the last, jumps 8 well again, spots a good stride. There the jumps, the horse had been making himself in the back straight, and he quickens away to win, and win with plenty up his sleeve. I thought the second horse was done well, the third was done well to come from so far back and could end up in a handicap at the festival, and land the Lad, who was fourth. He's making steady-ish progress too for Tom Simmons.
He is. I wondered whether I agree with you about Unexpected Party, by the way. I could see both him and That's Alright Gino running well in handicaps potentially at the festival. The winner they're talking about, Turners. That's the most substantial performance yet from Stage Star. I know he bossed the field off 1-4-2, but when he does something like that, he does look like he's got a bit of star quality. He does, and to be honest with you, looking at him there, I think the further he was going, the better he was going. So you'd be rather Brown Advisory for him? He looked like he wanted further. He looked the further he was going. Did you watch him at the last fence of the circuit to go? He's just about holding his position on the inside. Yet the further they were going, the further he was going to win. Okay, interesting point. Okay, I'll take a look at where he is in the betting for next week's show. But we're going to look at the Naas Novice Chase over 3 miles, and this was a race that was settled in the steward's room. But you're going to talk us through it first. I am. Look, am I right? Sorry. Down the inside, Ramel is on the outside. You've in third place Chemical Energy in the red. Then you have the eventual winner under Brian Cooper, whose name has escaped me. Francine is in the blue, the Devil's Coachman. And this race, not much happened because Francine is right with them at the fourth last fence. They hadn't gone quick. It's turned into a bit of a dash to the second last fence. Am I right goes to his left. Ramelays goes very left.
and that gap opens in the middle that Brian Cooper tried to get into on the Devil's Coachman. Again at the last he gets swez out, Ramilez gets to the front and the Devil's Coachman rallies close home. Now people say Paul Townend didn't go all out. You could make the same argument for Brian Cooper on the Devil's Coachman. He never lifted his whip on him, and he runs it down to half a length, was it, in the end? A neck in the end. And it was changed in the Stewarding, and we'll show you just why now. And when you show the head on, you see the width of the gap, and you see how far back Paul Townend comes. Yeah, here it is, look. When they land, you can see the gap. Now, Brian is coming as Paul comes back. Watch Paul's right elbow. Out it comes, over it comes. He's closing the gap. 1, 2.
It's a straightforward demotion for me.
I thought watching it live he would lose it, and they haven't appealed it. I thought he would. Now the last fence and my right definitely drifts to the left, or the right as we're looking, and that causes most of the interference here. But I thought at the second last Ramilez closed the door, and now the other way of looking at that then too is, and it's irrelevant to the result, but when you're riding a hold up horse you just wonder why Brian Cooper was so anxious to get involved so early.
Well, also I think the two concepts can peacefully coexist. You can wonder why the Devil's Coachman was sort of called into a pocket and did get involved at that stage, and you can wonder about that. But you know, the question the stewards have to ask themselves
I completely agree. I'm only after talking, like from the event that happened, I can see exactly why the result was changed as it should be. But then if you watched it from a racing point of view,
exactly,
and turn it around, you're kind of thinking Brian probably didn't need to be getting involved that early.
And the two concepts completely peacefully coexist, I think. You know, should you have been there? Should you have been doing that? And did you have a right to do that? Yes, you did.
Yeah.
So the stewards sort of asked whether it's dangerous riding.
No,
it's not.
No,
well, I'm just going through the procedure. So they ask whether, with an uninterrupted run, might the sufferer have beaten the interferer, and they've come to the conclusion yes. And then they deal with whether, and you know, that could be accidental interference. There doesn't have to be any fault by the rider who's caused the interference or whose horse has caused the interference. And then they decided that Paul Townend was guilty of careless riding, and they cautioned him on the basis of his record. But you mentioned the word manoeuvre there. Doesn't that push it into improper?
Yeah, but I've always thought that careless and improper have been mixed up in both rule books. I've thought it for years. I thought even when I was riding, there's a difference. And to me, improper is the word because that's the word in the rule book. It's a manoeuvre. To me, Paul Townend rolled over to close the door, only he was too far away to get all the way back. So, to be honest with you, he kind of had to give up and stay straight. So, I do think that what you get suspended for careless is definitely the wrong phrase, the wrong word. I think the improper and careless should almost be swapped around.
You were arguing this to me before we went on air, and I thought that was an interesting concept. I certainly feel that the gap between careless and improper, which is rarely, if ever, bridged, just seems unworkable.
But see, people say, oh, but then if you're talking about the improper bands, they are so much bigger. But I would think a day or two is what the improper should carry the careless bands, and careless should be carrying the improper bands. I would flip them completely around. It
was an interesting argument that we made. Well, I'm sure we'll expand on it more during the course of the rest of the series, or maybe during the course of the year. But that was interesting, your flipping idea. Right, let's have a look at the betting for the key Novice Chases over the weekend, starting with the Irish Arkle. This should sort a few out at Willie Mullins's.
Oh, God, it will. And more than that. But look at the pace in it, Lydia. Dysart Dynamo, Banbridge, El Fabiolo, Flame Bear. They're all front runners.
Phil Dorr first-time cheek pieces. Does that surprise you?
It did slightly, yeah. Made a mistake at Leopardstown. He landed at Christmas. He landed in the ditch. But I think this would be a really strongly run race. I'm not surprised. Appreciated his favourite. I think the one that's probably been overlooked will be the hold-up horse, and that's St. Roy. I think these could really get involved a long way out, and it'll play to a closer, especially at Leopardstown, and that could be St. Roy.
Does Appreciated have to be ridden that way? Banbridge doesn't.
Appreciate doesn't. He'll definitely take a lead, whereas I would think Banbridge will buck out. Whether he'll keep going with them will be a different story, but Flame Bearer looks to have found a way of doing it. That was making it in Fairyhouse. Dysart Dynamo definitely looks like
there's only one way of going.
And Il Fabiolo, he made all of Fairyhouse. I think that's a cracking race.
It really is. I'm really looking forward to it. Right, let's have a look at the Scilly Isles, because Sandown's got a great...
Mullinsisation will work in that race. Mullinsisation will work in that race.
Yeah, absolutely. Without Willie Mullins, we wouldn't have a cracking race for it, though.
And if you only had two, it wouldn't be the race either.
Jerry Colombe heading over to the Scilly Isles.
Yeah, good winner at Limerick. look, it's a similar race to the one that's in Leopardstown on Sunday, where Gordon's other horse, Mighty Potter, is going to go. Thunderrock, Monreal, Barrack, Coastal. Look, they're both behind the Great Whacker. Here's Sunday's race. These aren't declarations, obviously decks aren't till tomorrow morning, but look, Mighty Potter's coming here after winning the Drinmore. You've James de Burley, you're not going to have Il Fabiolo, he's in Saturday. Gaillard de Menil, Jerry with me, Churchstone Warrior. Again, they're decent novice chases, Lydia.
That's going to sort a few out as well, isn't it? I couldn't see why Thunderrock should be shorter bite than Monmiral. I know I've got a thing about Monmiral, I really do like him, but I just couldn't see it at all.
Me neither, but I wouldn't think either would beat Jerry Colomb.
Really? Do
Yeah.
we really know how good Jerry Colomb is yet?
No, but Jerry Colomb has done very little wrong.
Well, he's done nothing wrong. He's won
Exactly.
everything he's been put in front
What
of.
about the others? What have they done wrong?
Yeah, but they've been in deeper, I'd say. Well, Miral, certainly.
Right.
Anyway, well, we don't have to hypothesise, do we? We can talk about it this time next week, which is what we'll do. So we're coming to the end of the show, and you'll be asking, where are the juveniles? Where are the novice hurdlers from the past week? And our answer is...
Just too much happened last week.
Also, I quite like to compare and contrast
Yeah.
them with the races that we're going to see from the Dublin Racing Festival coming up this weekend.
I'd agree. You have obviously the finesse versus the spring. You can tie the form in, and the same with the novice hurdlers. The Nathaniel Lacey with the Ballymore and Cheltenham last week. So, yeah, we'll have a bit of content for next week.
Yeah, we will. You won't miss a thing. We'll definitely be going over the novice hurdlers and the juveniles. If you were looking ahead to one race, I mean, obviously it's a shame, but not entirely unpredictable that Blood Destiny isn't against Lossiemouth. In the novice hurdlers, is the one that of the two that you're particularly looking forward to?
Obviously, high definition, very facile Vega will be interesting. For the Nathaniel Lacey at 2.6, but I've always been a sucker for the top races, and obviously you've Gallop in the Champ going 3 1/4. But I do think Vauban, Stateman, Honeysuckle, that'll do me.
Well, that tees it up nicely for next week, doesn't it? Thank you very much for your company.
Thank you.
We're looking forward to seeing you next week. Enjoy the racing this weekend. We'll see you this time next week for the next edition of Road to Cheltenham.
Paddy Power, sponsors of the Road to Cheltenham.